Hello, everyone. Welcome to my talk, Genderf 2077. My name is Aubrey Scott, and I'm the founder and CEO at Flying Cat Studios. And I'm here today to talk to you a bit about character creators, Cyberpunk 2077, and the inclusion of sexual organs in those character creators and how we might be able to make them a bit more inclusive of a lot of different folks. So, some of the reason that I'm talking to you about this today is that I have experience creating a gender as a spectrum character creator, trans-inclusive character creator for NASCAR Heat 3 and NASCAR Heat 4. I have also done an art grant funded prototype about like gardening and on vulva garden beds, imagining your sexuality as a garden. And I'm also a queer trans woman with multiple personal body experiences throughout my lifetime. So I have a lot of perspective on that to bring. And I am at the intersection of like programming, design, and art. Like I have expertise in all of those, and that's the kind of problem that character creators tend to be. So we're going to start a little bit about my personal story. And when I was a kid, I didn't really know what it meant to be transgender. My understanding was that meant that I would feel like a girl trapped in a boy's body, which is like the general message that I understood. And it was strange because I never really felt trapped in my body. I didn't really, wasn't really sure that I was a girl. And so that story never really mapped to my experience, and I didn't think that I was trans because of it. One of the things that was really clear for me, though, was that I constantly thought about what it would be like to be reborn a girl. And I didn't really think that that was a real possibility, so I kind of dismissed it as just a thought. I, like many of you, played a lot of video games as I was growing up. So when I was about 10, my parents agreed to get me an online account for the game Ultima Online. And one of the things that you could do in that game is you could create a girl character. I spent a lot of my time there, and eventually I got curious about this, and I created some girl characters. And I understood even at that time that it may be a little bit strange for me as like a boy assigned at birth to be playing a girl character. And I thought about what I might need to tell other people. And I wasn't really worried about telling strangers, but my cousins used to play the game with me. So I thought about what I would tell them. And I was pretty sure I would just tell them that I was curious, which was true, but they never really asked. So at least for now, I was safe. Some of my other single player games had femme character options in them. And so I started playing femme characters in those games. And eventually I started playing World of Warcraft, and I also created girl characters in those games. By then I was playing with friends at school, and I thought about what I would need to say to them. And I needed a little bit better explanation than just I was curious. So I figured I would say that I enjoyed watching a girl character a lot more than watching a guy character for hours on end because you played the game for so long. And that explanation in itself was a bit toxic, and worse, it buried my trans identity even deeper inside me to the point where I didn't really even understand that that's what that was. And eventually I got up the courage to be able to play girl characters in tabletop role-playing games. And this was cool because I could actually take on the role of that character and like really be that character. But there was no more hiding behind screens. I had to sit in front of people who I knew and who I cared about and really try and be that girl. And I used to imagine getting a gender change belt, getting these cursed items that would just switch my gender for me, and I would just have the best explanation for why I was playing a girl character. So I didn't really think about what it meant until those feelings just kept popping up and weren't really going away. And when that became clear that they weren't going away, I told my wife, and the feelings got to be hard to deal with, and I didn't know how to navigate them. And so I hid from the feelings for a while. As I got into the game industry, got my first like stable job there, I started doing more trans research, and it became safer for me to kind of explore those feelings. And I began to understand that there were a lot of different ways to be trans, like as many different ways to be trans as there were trans people, and that my experience really fit within that narrative. Like it wasn't just the one boy trapped in a girl's body narrative, there were a lot more. And then it just like finally clicked for me. I started transitioning. I went on this path of self-discovery and exploring my feels through therapy and journaling and yoga. I got on hormones, and I changed my name, and I came out to my friends and my family and my coworkers, and I just generally started my life as Aubrey. And then I made a trans inclusive character creator for NASCAR. And you might be wondering, like, trans inclusive character creator, NASCAR, like, how did those things go together and why did you do that? But I remembered my time as I was growing up playing girl characters and how important it was to me. That binary choice, even though it didn't really map to my experience, really was a lifeline that I just held on to. And I was curious if I could make this more trans inclusive. And it was the game that I was working on. So I had to put a lot of time into what I was creating anyway. So I was curious if I could make it more of a spectrum, because that's how I understood gender as a trans woman, and that you could move between this masculine to neutral to feminine, and like some folks don't even experience their gender within that spectrum. Sometimes they don't identify with gender at all. And if I could help people like have somebody who looked more like them and they could play these games a little bit more comfortably, or start to understand that they were trans, or help them go through their own transitions, like that would be worth it to me. And so I designed this character creator intentionally to be trans inclusive, but I took parts that we already had and I rearranged them into a more inclusive setup. I proposed having a single androgynous model that we mix and matched different blend shapes on, that would be masculine and feminine blend shapes and non-binary blend shapes, although I had trouble getting folks to understand what like non-binary blend shapes might look like. And we didn't just put them in there as binary shapes. We allowed folks to slide from this androgynous base model to the full blend shape, which was already supported by blend shapes. We just had to turn it on and allow the controls to be in there. And this gave you more of a true spectrum. And so I championed this and I coded it and I protected the feature until it shipped. And then I started talking about it with other trans folks and other people. And like people were really excited about how inclusive it was, but trans folks were like deeply interested in this. They were interested in characters who looked like them, and they were interested in exploring exactly the kind of characters that they could play with as they played with their own gender and started to understand more about themselves. And the surprising thing to me was that these folks were interested in playing a game that they were otherwise never interested in. This preference, like, seemed to transcend their preference in genre, which, as we all know, can be pretty strong. Like, some folks only play a certain genre of games. And these folks were interested in ditching that just so that they could experience this in games because other games didn't have it. So I want you to hold on to that as we talk about cyberpunk, just how deep that need for accurate representation really is. And as we talk about cyberpunk and what character creator options really look like, I was really curious about the fact that they were including genital character options. I was wondering if it would be refreshing and inclusive, even though that there was a lot of controversy around the cyberpunk title. There still could have been folks who were actually like inclusively thinking about this process. So I was curious if it would allow us to explore and allow us to customize our bodies and really fully inhabit the space as we knew ourselves to be in the current experience. And not just trans folks, like folks of all different sizes and shapes and like genders and different representations. Would it allow us to experiment and try things on or explore different feelings? And the reality of it was that we didn't get all of that. We got one mislabeled vulva. All of the outer bits is a vulva, and the vagina is only the canal that would normally lead to the cervix and uterus for those who have them. And we got some haircuts, and that was it. We got two penises at least, and you were able to change penis size a little bit, but it wasn't like I was expecting a bold step forward towards this like futuristic idea of what gender could be. And instead, we got to stumble toward a toxic status quo, a message that was there was only one way to be. That same message that leads a lot of women and a lot of folks who have vulvas to seek out surgery to change their body to conform to an ideal beauty standard, and a message that discourages exploration and suppresses accurate information about what real bodies really look like, and that it's okay to have a healthy, different presentation of your vulva. So I was doing research at the time for my grant funded project, Goddess Grotto. And these were some of the books that helped me understand what the real variety of vulvas really looked like. And they helped me understand that vulvas had not only different shapes on the outside, but that they had unique wiring underneath, and that they were different for every person who had a vulva. And the vulvas and penises were made of the same parts and rearranged in different ways. And this was the fundamental foundation that helped me create Goddess Grotto, which was a prototype that helped us help people explore the concept of arranging plants on a variety of vulva garden beds to explore the question of what their sexuality might look like as a garden. And I intentionally included a variety of vulvas to destigmatize the variation and to provide a safe space for people to be able to explore and for people to be able to heal some of the trauma that our world causes us. And I was greatly surprised at the results. Like people from the initial prototype to the digital prototype deeply engaged with the prompt and created a variety of vulva gardens that had deep, profound meanings to them and really showed what they knew their sexuality to be. And I was curious how this would translate to character creators. So if we look at character creators as a grounds for like really inclusive spaces, not only for trans folks, but like for people of all different shapes and sizes and what real breasts and vulvas and penises really look like, you start to understand that like breasts are all different shapes. They have different volumes in different parts of the breasts, and that would allow you to have like better customization of your parts to match your own bodies. We have different like areola sizes and nipple sizes and shapes, and some folks have extra nipples or less nipples than two, like they might have one or none. And that's completely within the like natural course of our bodies and like the stories that we have that we live through in our lives. And the positioning of those nipples could also be in different spots for everybody. The positioning of our breasts on our chest are possible through boned rigging, and like I've labeled some of the ways that we can represent these things in our games next to them, and like the rotation and facing of our breasts are different in different people, and the scars and textures of breast tissue are different in every person. We have different skin textures, and you see that in faces of character creators already, and that's no different for breasts as well. And scars tell you about whether folks have had surgery on their breasts. They may have been like cancer survivors or had their breasts removed to more accurately represent their gender presentation. And like being able to show those stories like is an important piece of character creators. Independent sizing of breasts, because like breasts are asymmetrical. Like almost every woman that I know has like up to half or a full cup size different between one breast or the other. And like being able to include tattoos and piercings and all of these things are like expressions that are necessary to show up fully in these games. And seeing how these practical examples are put in, like bone rigging is something that we use to move the eyes, nose, and mouth in NASCAR to change those areas on your face. And that can be used in the breasts and the nipples positioning, and modifying of shapes and allowing asymmetrical shapes are possible through blend shapes and just not having them be one blend shape together, but having them be independent. Mix and matching of all of these shapes and different things on a single model makes it possible to do a lot of these options of one breast or no breasts or multiple breasts. So keep in mind that all of these things have already been done before. Like I did them in NASCAR, and I'm applying the same techniques to how we would approach these in sexual organs. I'd also like to bring up that like the voice and pronouns in Cyberpunk were attached to your base model choice. And that is kind of strange. Like just give people the ability to pick which one they want, and don't make them choose a base character model, have a single base character model. And if you want different model bases, just offer those as blend shapes. Now, as we get into vulvas and penises and everything in between, there are like, they're all made up of the same parts rearranged in different ways. Remember that it's a vulva and not a vagina. The vagina is a piece of the genitals, and the vulva is like all of the outer bits. And these all have corollaries, and I've included most of them here. In the womb, everybody starts out with a vulva, and then that changes as you get further into your development. So you can offer like different blend shapes for labia majora, minora, and potentially scrotum shapes. You can offer like different blend shapes for upper, mid, and lower sections of the labia. You could do more if you'd like, but that would be enough to really show the different sizes and shapes of like labia, and the different lengths of them as well, allowing folks to like scale up from the androgynous place to these larger blend shapes would allow them to express that. Vaginal opening shapes would also help you express your uniqueness and the asymmetry of like all of these parts, that the left side and the right side don't necessarily have to be the same. As we continue, the clitoris maps to the penis, and the hooding maps to the foreskin, and like these can all be changed and adjusted, the like size and shape and length of all of these things, and like how open or closed your labia are, and like they can be like fully open or partially closed, or like fully closed or completely sealed and contain testicles. And you can have one or two or less, like 0 testicles, which would also map to folks like actual presentation of their bodies. Vulva pronation, of like how it's showing on the body and positioned on your pelvis, can also be super powerful. And including our stories about like the scarring, as I mentioned, like on the breasts, like scarring in vaginal areas includes like folks who've had bottom surgery, folks who've had cleanup and adjustment to their vulvas, folks who've gone through childbirth, and just generally anybody who's had surgeries through there. Piercings and different places, as well as like tattoos and pubic hair shape and texture, and like the different coloring and texturing of all of the different parts, because we have different skin colors and different skin textures, and they should be represented here as well. Now, when I talk to folks about what they really wanted in character creators and what they'd want out of genital representation and sexual organ representation in character creators, they often talked about like the different ways that they wanted their bodies to be. And I think some of the reason that they didn't talk about the sexual parts is partially they don't think about that very much. But I also think that there aren't enough good options out there for folks to even know that this is something that they may possibly want. You could offer a lot of individual customization in bodies, and I think that that would be a really great place to be. This does create more multipliers when you get into costumes and clothing. But all of those can have blend shapes to match these, and might have a heavier footprint in your game. But most character creators I see are second-class features. Like they don't really allow you to be like take your choices and character creators and see them propagate through the game. If you're interested in doing that, allow things like the removal of limbs and the addition and removal of prosthetics, and the changing of walk cycles, and how you move and interact with the world, and how you adjust your body frames, and including like fat and differently abled characters in your games. And make sure that the costumes and the world support all of these choices as you do. And you end up having a much more authentic and meaningful choice in your character creator, and allows folks to more authentically step into your games. Now, you may be asking, like, why doesn't this level of customization already exist? I mean, it's possible that, at least as far as genital customization is concerned, that it may not be as important to gameplay. Even as your characters are concerned, I've definitely heard the argument that it's not as important to your gameplay. And maybe it's not that, maybe it's too complicated to actually do these things. And maybe folks don't really know that much about anatomy, so they don't know that there is this level of customization that really needs to be represented. And it's possible that, like, there's just no template to follow because nobody's really done this before. I do think that this matters. And the reason why it matters is because if it matters what's in your pants, and if it matters, like, what choices you make about your character, then it matters how we represent them. The variety matters because our world is varied, and games are a reflection of that world. Our inclusions in those games shape what people know about the world around them. And as we already know, representation is important because people of all shapes, sizes, genders, and lots of things in between, like, they deserve to be seen and understood and represented authentically to others and for themselves. And it's not that complicated. We already have the tools to solve these problems. Most of what I've proposed are things that have already shipped in character creators. We have animation rigs, we have morph targets, we have base character models, and I'm actually proposing a model that has less work because you don't have to maintain two separate models. We just have to reorganize how we structure them, and then they can be more inclusive and a better representation of the reality of our world. And anatomy matters because what we see shapes what we know. And what we know shapes how we feel. And what we feel shapes what we desire deep inside. And what we desire starts to shape how our choices come about. And those choices shape the systems and the world around us. And once those systems are in place, they're hard to change. And if folks don't see themselves represented in these worlds and in these systems, we may not exist to other people. And worse, we may not exist to ourselves. I didn't know that I was trans because I didn't know that my story mapped to a trans story at all. And if you're waiting for a good plan, use this plan. Like, we just talked about a bunch of strategies and tools that use the things that we already have, and they're practical, and they've shipped in real games, real AAA games. This is a plan for when body customization is important to gameplay, but it's also just a starting point and a blueprint for anybody who wants to have a more inclusive character creator. And if you need something more custom, you can hire experts like me and like other folks who do this work to talk to your team and to consult on your process and to bring up things that you otherwise wouldn't understand or think about. Include folks in the process from diverse communities and diverse bodies and genders. Bring them into your testing pipeline. Don't just, like, take their advice and then, like, go off and do your thing and don't see if you hit their mark. Like, see if it speaks to them as you go through your process, and pay them for their time. Pay experts to come in and speak to your team before they start, when they can actually affect the process. Our character creators, I believe, is a portal for people to enter our worlds. And the more accurately that people can represent themselves and represent who they want to be in our worlds, the better that people are going to identify with those worlds. And the more tools that we give people to create that authentic representation, the easier it's going to be for people to become a part of your world. The easier it's going to be for people to explore difficult feelings in a safe space. And when we give people those tools, the magic just sort of works. Thanks.